welcome back to my channel, and welcome to this month's reading wrap up. I think that's probably the most coherent intro I've ever done for one of these videos. I remember to introduce myself. Woo! Hi. Last year, I remember I did March was my most read, was the month where I read the most. Now I think I figured out why. It's because that's when the Easter holidays were. And I had nothing to do. And as such, I read a lot more than I usually do. And that has happened again. Because this month I read 20 books. Which is insane. But a large part of that is to do with, well, one, again, it was the Easter holidays again, and, well, as you can probably tell from the thumbnail, it was a large majority of horrible history books. I will get to them when I get to them. The first book I read this month was Uncovering Norse Mythology, Guide into Norse Gods and Goddesses, Viking Warriors and Magical Creatures. Lucas Russo. If you'd seen my last reading wrap up, you would hear that I was kind of entering a reading slump, which would be shocking because, again, 20 books this month. So how did I get through this reading slump? Well, I DNF'd the book I was reading, and then instead picked up non-fiction book. So I read majority of just non-fiction books, starting with this one, which is pretty standard. It's the basics of everything Norse mythology, and it has pictures, which is fun. It summarizes a lot of the myths and some of what the gods have done with their culture, and a whole bunch of fun stuff. And turns out that some of the Norse gods are still worshipped in some Nordic countries, which is always fun, though they are different from how they are with Norse. Oh, I rated this 3.25 stars. And then the next book I read by the same author was Uncovering Celtic Mythology, a Beginner's Guide into the World of Celtic Myths, Fairy Tales, Folklore, Warriors, Celtic Gods and Creatures by Lucas Russo. I really wanted to pick up something about Celtic mythology because I'm from England, and while Celtic mythology is generally Wales, Ireland and Scotland, there is obviously a lot of stuff to do with, well, England in it as well, before Christianization happened. And so I was just curious about the myths and stuff that are from my home, because when you think Greek, when you think myths, you think the Norse, the Greek, the Egyptian. There's one thing on here that does, I think, on the blurb, it says here on the bird, how the legend of King Arthur links with Celtic mythology. I don't really think I read that. Either I missed it, or I don't know, I was tired when I got to the point, because it is the last bullet point on the blurb. But yeah, overall it was a good experience, and I rated it 3 stars. And it did also help me because the next book I picked up was Black Bridge by Joe O'Hagan, which is a book, obviously, that's set in Ireland and is heavily based off of Celtic mythology. You don't need to read a book about Celtic mythology before reading this, but it did help, for me to recognize some of the characters and understand what some of the things that showed up in the book actually were. This follows Lorcan, Maeve, and I'm probably gonna pronounce this one Oisin. Basically, at the start of the book, Lorcan's been acting some fishy, and this isn't a spoiler, it's on the blurb, Lorcan's, and it is the first chapter, but Lorcan is acting a bit fishy and has been like estranging himself from his friend Maeve. So Maeve follows him to see what he's doing at night, because she's noticed that he's heading to this. Well, he's heading past her house every single night, and she wants to know what he's doing. And then somehow it turns out Lorcan has been communicating with his dead parents, and this is a direct quote off the blurb. Not only that, but the veil between worlds is thinning, and the other world has begun to overlap with their own. And basically, from there, so basically Lorcan drags Maeve and then later Oisin into the situation with his parents that isn't technically on the blurb, but it does say but they become embroiled in a struggle between the ancient powers of the other world, and all while unseen hands manipulate from the shadows. I enjoyed this. This is supposed to be the start of a series, but I have absolutely no idea if he's actually going to continue it. I hope he does, just because mainly it's a bit drawn out, I won't lie, and some of the characters' relationships are a bit messy, I suppose, but I would say it is rather enjoyable. But the characters are a little bit one-dimensional, so it is very plot more than it is character driven. And I mainly say that is because I know nothing about the main characters' appearances. I know Maeve has red hair, and that Lorcan and Oisin have hair. Besides that, I know nothing about what any of them look like at all. And I rated this 4 stars. The ending did really surprise me, and it is left on a cliffhanger. So it is, very much supposed to set up, at the very least, a sequel, if not an entire series. But, pardon me. But it seems that, I don't know when this was published, but I think I remember I got this, 2 years ago, so, and I've seen nothing about that. I'd also like to point out, this is the thing, there's no, there's no, copyright page, which is weird, right? As far as I'm aware, you can't legally publish a book without a copyright page, and you could say that it's because it's printed by Amazon, but this one is also printed by Amazon, and it also has a copyright page that's like that, which I don't know if Joe O'Hagan didn't copyright his work properly, or if I just don't have a legitimate copy of his book, but that's just a little weird, isn't it? But anyway, the next book I read was Smashing Saxons, a Horrible Histories book by Terry Deary, which is a children's history book about the Saxons, which is the period of time in England from 410 to 1066, so the period of Saxons ends with the Battle of Hastings. And I rated this 3 stars. It's a standard children's book, and I've mainly picked up Horrible Histories books because there is a sitcom in Britain, I don't know if it's available in other countries, it's a sketch comedy show that is about history, and it's very funny, and it's musicals. Yeah, and then the next book I picked, which is the next one in that series, is The Horrible Histories, Vicious Vikings, also by Terry Deary, which is, I have this one. I say I have, this is my brother's, as you can tell, as it is not in the best condition. He's 10, so it could be slightly forgiven. But yes, I also rated this 3 stars. And then after that, I picked up the next book in the series, which was Horrible Histories, Storming Norman's... Oh wait, no. Time Period for the Vikings. I forgot about the time period for the Vikings. So... where's the time? Is there not a timeline? Okay, yeah. Timeline for the Vikings, 787 to 1066 as well. I suppose it's just the Vikings' involvement in Britain. Though to be fair, from what I know outside of that book, and I was reading the book, the actual beginning of the Vikings as a society is debated. Anyway, Storming Normans is the next book I read in the Horrible History series, and this time period was 911 to 1204, and I rated it 3 stars. I'm gonna speed run this. This is gonna be the shortest reading wrap I've ever done, probably because these books are really short. They average out to around 127 pages, so I got through them really quickly, and obviously I had nothing else to do besides reading. So the next book I read was the Measly Middle Ages, Horrible Histories, still by Terry Derry, and this time period was 410 to 1492. Yeah. Though I think the Middle Ages, when it actually ended, is debated in history, I suppose. But I'm not going to comment on that. I rated this 3 stars. And then the next book I read was The Angry Aztecs. Also, obviously, Horrible Histories by Terry Derry. And this time period was 3114 BC to 1901. I mean, that's the timeline that's listed in the book when it ends. Well, that's AD. So that's, and I think that's the last. Mexicans conquer the last free mind group might live on as peasants in the land they once ruled. Yeah, so that's, I suppose, the last fall of the thing. And I rated this 3 stars. And then I think it was really interesting. Well, I mean, the next book I read was Horrible Histories, Incredible Incans, obviously Terry Derry. He's now my most read author, if you weren't aware. So this was 11,000 BC to 1525 AD. I think what was really interesting about reading these 2 books after reading just about English history and obviously European stuff is it was really interesting in like a break and see what was going on basically at the same time as we were all as other things happened, which I know is how history works, but yeah, it's always interesting. And then the next book I read was also Horrible Histories, which is Terrible Tudors by Terry Derry. And this time period, where's the timeline? Timeline was 1485 to 1603. Which details the reign from Henry VII to Queen Elizabeth I. And I rated it 3 stars. Majority of these books I've rated 3 stars, if you weren't aware. Now here's a book you have seen before because I was reading it first in the how many pages can I read in a week? Or a day for a week, or whatever I called it, I can't remember. vlog, which I started with this one. Side note, last I checked, that has 27 views, which I think is the most views I've ever gotten for a video that isn't a TikTok compilation, which really surprised me because honestly I think that video is fairly boring. But they to each their own. Anyway, so Even More Terrible Tutors, which is basically, instead of this book focuses on specifically tutor society and how it changed from Henry VII to Elizabeth I, this one focuses specifically on the royal family and how each of them ruled. And then the next book, which you also saw in that vlog, which I picked up, was Good Wives. Good Wives by Louisa May Alcott, which this is the sequel to Little Women, but usually Little Women and Good Wives is sold as one book. The main reason I bought Little Women is because the book of the book of Little Women I have only has Little Women in it, so I needed to get Good Wives. And I read Little Woman in January, and I did it in a My Name Picks the Books I Read reading vlog, which I will link in description, as well as the vlog I read this one in, though again I don't think it's that interesting. So Little Woman is a historical fiction, though originally I suppose it was contemporary, that's set, well, originally during, I think, the American Civil War. Don't quote me on that though. And it follows these sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, and as well as their mother and their neighbor Laurie, and basically them just living their lives, and it was very cozy. I think I enjoyed Little Women a little more than I did Good Wives, but this was still a very enjoyable experience, and I rated this 3.5 stars. And I will at some point be picking up, I don't remember if it's Little Men or Jo's Boys that comes after Act B, but I'll be picking up one of them at some point. It's basically them growing up together and how different they all turn out to be. I guess in a way Jo's the main character, but I don't know. I mainly read this through an audiobook, so some of the stuff was slightly different because it was like a dramatization audiobook. But I still really enjoyed it. And then the next book I read, which is also again in that reading vlog, was Arrow Vengeance by Oscar Valderrama and Lauren Soto, which is a tie-in book to the CW series, well, based on the hit CW series of just called Arrow. And this was published in 2016. I have no idea the canonicity of this, as I was more, when it came to the CW TV shows, I was more of a Flash fan, and I only really watched Arrow when it was the crossover episodes. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this takes place over season 1 of the Arrow, and instead of following Oliver Queen, who is the Arrow, I suppose, it follows Slade Wilson, Sebastian Blood, and Isabel Rochev. Sebastian was my favorite protagonist. I don't know if that's controversial or not. I think I sympathized the most with him. I found Isabel kind of annoying, to be honest, but I understand why she was angry, but I didn't really understand why that was Oliver's fault, and it felt like she was blaming him for things that had happened to her. And I guess like Slade also is a bit more sympathetic as well with what happened to him. So yeah. So it's all told specifically from their POVs, and I did really enjoy this and hope to pick up the next book in the series at some point, but I don't really know where I would find it. And I rated this 3.5 stars. Oh, and to say, we did occasionally get like little snippets of like the setting and some of the characters from The Flash, so I did really enjoy that. Not a huge spoiler or anything, because they're in it for a split second. And then the next book I read, which the final book in that vlog, was Slimy Stuart's, the next horrible history book. And then the Stuart era was 1603 to 1688, which is obviously James I to Charles II, I believe, or is it James II? Oh no, I got it wrong. The timeline's not right. Okay, so the timeline is actually 1603 to 1714, when Anne dies when Anne passes away. Which, yeah, I didn't know specifically a lot about the Stuart era because we don't cover it that much in school, so I had no idea how certain. So I had no idea we had a James II, which I don't know if that's good or not. The monarchy isn't that big of a deal anymore. I think probably it would have been treason a while ago, but it's not anymore, thankfully, as far as I'm aware. And then the next book I read, which I did my monthly reread of Tabanoff and Datgo, which I do every single month. And then I also read Tabanoff as an audiobook, so as I do every time I listen to that audiobook specifically. I didn't do this when I listened to Good Vibes, mainly because I was trying to do an immersive read, which I probably shouldn't have done because the audiobook and that specific version don't line up specifically, because they did change specific things to match, I don't know, for the sake of the dramatization. Anyway, this is what I coloured, which if you don't know, every time I listen to an audiobook, I take a superhero out of this colouring book and I colour them the colours of a pride flag. This one is the genderqueer pride flag. So the next book I picked up, I finished after my rereads, was Dark Knights and Dingy Castles, which is set around from the time period of 500 AD, well, it says here because it's when the stirrup was invented in China, and then it ends in 1621 because that's the last of the tournaments that the knights used to fight in. I wasn't really big into knights. I've only really read one book which had a lot of knights in it, I guess, which was, I think, Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, which I think I did do is an A reading wrap-up. I can't remember which one. But yes, and this was also 3 stars. The next book I read, continuing my read of Horrible Histories, was Gorgeous Georgians, which is honestly, I was really excited to read about this because we don't learn about Georgians in school unless you willingly take history A-level, and unfortunately I don't think I could handle doing an A-level, and even if I wanted to, I failed one of my main GCSEs, so I wouldn't have been able to do an A-level anyway. I'm retaking it this year. Anyway, the timeline for Georgians is 1714 to 1830, and then I think it's worth mentioning, after George IV died, his brother William took the throne, and he's the king before Queen Victoria, though no one ever mentioned him because he didn't really do much, I suppose. But, yeah. And I rated this 3 stars. Always fun to read about. For the American viewers, George III is the king who was reigning when you guys had your revolution. Which is probably one of the main reasons as to why we don't learn anything about them in secondary school. But anyway, the next book I read, continuing horrible histories, was The Vile Victorian, and I got the TV tie-in edition of the book, which is always fun because this came out, I think probably all of these books I think were probably reprinted when the TV show started to come out with the actors in it. Yeah, and I think I already owned Vile Victorian, but I got rid of that copy because I wanted the one with the actor on it, which I think this is Jim Hopkins. We'll see how right I am later. But yeah, I did write a review for this one though, very short, and it's not a spoiler, I just wanted to read it out. I will forever wonder how anyone survived the Victorian age, because they went through so many diseases and a couple wars, and London definitely sounded disgusting. So I'm again shocked anyone survived any of this. And yeah, and then the final book I read this month was Horrible Histories, The Frightful First World War, which is obviously the time period for Royal Victorians. I don't really think you care, but I want to read it anyway. Which is 1837 to 1901? Yes, 1901 is when Queen Victoria died. Anyway, yes, obviously don't need to do timeline for that. We all know when the First World War happened. And obviously I think it doesn't glorify war, which I don't know, I haven't read that many books that detail wars in general, and it gets really into the nitty-gritty and stuff, and it does actually go into I think a little bit about the German side of it, the soldiers and what they were doing. So it touches only on it briefly. I don't think that many things actually do, because obviously we won. But I think when it comes to the First World War, the sides are a bit murky about who was in the right. I mean, Germany just joined because Kaiser Wilhelm wanted a fight, and then we just joined because Belgium was getting invaded, and then somehow we're the two main countries that you talk about during the World War, either of the World Wars. I mean, obviously Germany was definitely in the wrong during World War II, and they're horrible, but I think during World War I, it's a little more complicated, and everyone just had a horrible time. And Germany did actually suffer quite a lot, especially considering we did a unit in history looking at specifically what happened to Germany between World War I and World War II, and it's actually really sad. They went through hyperinflation, and the Great Depression hit them horribly, which is one of the reasons Hitler rose to power. This comic at the end of this one specifically that I wanted to read out. So it's a little girl talking with her grandfather and asking the question, "Grandpa, I forgot which one was the war to end all wars," and there's a podium to a bunch of wars, which is the World War, First World War, Second World War, Korean War, Malaya, I'm sorry, I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, Vietnam, the Falklands War, Gulf War, Bosnia. And you know for a fact that is definitely out of date now. Granted, this was published in, I think, the 1990s. Yeah, 1998, so obviously it's going to be out of date now, which is horrible, considering how and loads of people were considering that this would definitely be the end, and I honestly, it made me sad, really sad for these people who lost their lives. I mean, war was never pretty, and I did tear up a bit. Yeah, and I rated this 3.5 stars. And yeah, made me think a lot, and really sad to the point where I didn't want to continue reading for the rest of the day. Alright, and then so this is everything I read in April. Right, and so finally, reading journal. Whew. I've got to say, I have read, or at least attempted to read, every single book on my 25 for 25, which I don't think a lot of other booktubers can say. So, you know, I'm very pleased with that. Right. So everything from this point onwards is how much I read. A lot of green. And then obviously I'm not sure if it'll show up because I used the highlighter coloured pen, but I did add the ticks for this Horrible Histories books. Obviously I added the books, how many books I read here, which was a lot. I don't expect to read that many this month because well, I have one of my exams coming up at the end of this month, right before half term, and then here's the book I DNF'd, which is unfortunate because I did generally really want to read a Loki book, but hey ho. Here's my other series tracker where I added these two. So basically this series is just a bunch of books about different mythologies, which I do plan on picking up at some point. And here's the April books. I tried to get the covers of every single book I read, like the correct things. So this, it doesn't generally show up that well on camera, but this is actually the blue cover because I couldn't find a good quality image of the purple cover, and it does generally really annoy me. And then finally, this is what I did for May. It's not the greatest spread I've ever done, but it's definitely something. It's basically everything. I've still got a couple Horrible History books to get through, and obviously there's a lot. I know I own 28, I've read 18, so I still have, no, I've read 19 because I did finish a different Horrible Histories book on the 1st of May, so obviously that's the first book that will be in next month's reading wrap up. But so I've got I've got nine more to go in Horrible Histories, and then I've also got three full-size fiction books, and 2 of which are romances, one of which I think is just a fiction, and then I've got 2 non-fiction books about Greek mythology, and then I'm going to get into Percy Jackson, which hopefully means that I will be doing the reading vlog for at very least the first 5 Percy Jackson books. If not at the end of this, I'll probably start filming sometime at the end of this month or the beginning of next month, which is June. How are we almost halfway through the year? I think I say this every year. Time is annoying, but yeah, but that is everything I read in April, and at some point I'm gonna get to the Percy Jackson reading vlog. At some point I'm gonna do a bookshelf tour, and at some point I'm gonna do another my name picks the book, sorry, though that won't be for a while. But anyway, with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share, and all the other wonderful YouTube things, and bye!